All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, No Limits, Making Your Web Apps Accessible to Everyone. My name is Mark Ho. I am a technical solutions specialist here in Vancouver, and it's my honor and pleasure to welcome a special guest for today's webinar. So Clara Schmidt, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Oh,
My name is Clara Schmidt, obviously. I am a UI design lead on ArcGIS Hub and enterprise sites. I'm in Virginia, and I've always had a passion for web accessibility, and I'm a member of Esri's accessibility working groups, which cross-cuts multiple apps and teams.
that's amazing, and it's really an honor for us to have you here because we really appreciate your passion for this, and this is something that I think a lot of people are really interested in. So we're really glad that you're on board with us for the next hour. All right, so Clara's going to do most of the heavy lifting, and she's going to cover a lot of the best practices and basics of the nuts and bolts of being able to make your websites more accessible. So we'll get to that in a few minutes, but I do want to begin with just sort of a high-level discussion of what we're talking about today. And I'd like to start with this quote from the inventor of the World Wide Web. Well, that's a nice title. And here's the quote: "The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect." And that's really at the heart of this, right? The whole idea of the World Wide Web and the internet is that it should be open and transparent to everybody. And keeping that in mind in the context of web accessibility is really important for us as web developers and as content builders. So when we're talking about web accessibility, what are we talking about? It's the idea of be able to build applications and solutions that are free from barriers so that everyone has the opportunity to interact and contribute to that app. And the means of doing that is by creating perceivable, understandable, and interactive experiences. Now, the classic way we think of accessibility is for those that are limited in their ability to access the web. So if you have a physical disability or speech or visual, for example, those are what we normally think of when we think of accessibilities. But one of the things I also want to stress is that web accessibility isn't just for people with disabilities, it's for everybody, right? So when you think of being able to use different devices, like as your smartphone or your tablet, or like me, you're getting older and your abilities change, you want to be able to access the same type of web content. Also think about those people with slow internet or low bandwidth. I mean, we always think in terms of everybody's got high speed, but it's not really true. So think about those as well. And people that have temporary disabilities or situational limitations. And what I mean by that is through this slide. So again, we tend to think of disability on the permanent side, right? Whether you're not able to see or have limitations to your hearing, things like that. But there's also those temporary situations and those situational instances where you're not able to access the same things that others can. And just a personal anecdote on that. I had a few issues with blurry vision a couple of months ago for some weird reason. I just couldn't see things. But being able to adjust the text size and be able to change the contrast and use darker themes on websites, it still allowed me to be able to do my job. So those are the things that we need to think about in context of disability. So why do we test for accessibility? Well, here's some quick stats to kind of outline sort of the scope of all this. 6.2 million Canadians, or about 22% of the population, identify themselves as living with a disability. And on a larger scale, about 2 billion people in a few years are going to need some kind of assistive product in order to be able to access the web. So we're talking about a good 20% of the population out there that has some disability, or a person with a disability that's accessing the web and being able to interact with the web. And of course, there's a number of countries that have web accessibility laws and policies, including Canada, and I'll get to that in a sec. So what is the thrust, or the sort of the main foundation of web accessibility? Well, it's through the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, affectionately known as WCAG. And this was built by the World Wide Web Consortium, or the W3C, through their Web Accessibility Initiative. And it's kind of designed for a number of different purposes. It's designed for software developers like Esri to be able to build web authoring tools that are WCAG compliant, but it's also built for web content developers like yourselves who are building apps and publishing them on the web and following those guidelines as well. Now, there are 4 key principles to this, and the first is perceivable. So you want to be able to think of having all information available for, even though you might not have some of the senses or all of the senses. So a good example of that is being able to have alternative text for images, or to be able to have good descriptions for your charts, things like that. Operable, so your user interface needs to be operable for all. So the things that you could do on your mouse, you should be able to do on your keyboard, things like that. It needs to be understandable. So you want to be able to use clear, simple, understandable language to be able to convey the information on your site, but also to be able to navigate through the user interface. So things like using clear language, no jargon, or at least have definitions of the jargon, things like that are something you need to include. And then finally, robust. So as technology changes and as user agents advance, are your applications able to adopt to those new technological changes? So being able to use like changes to assistive devices, for example, those are all things that you need to think about as you're going through these 4 key principles. An easy way to think about it is POUR, POUR. Now at the bottom here, we see a simple guideline, a timeline of sort of the evolution of WCAG. Beginning in 1999 with version 1.0, we're at the current version is June 2018, that's version 2.1, but there is a 2.2 version that is coming out later this year. And then the next generation of these guidelines are 3.0, and that is currently in draft and is viewable through the W3C website. But in general, we kind of think of 2.0 as sort of the main foundation, and then these little increments sort of add on top of that main foundation. Now, in addition to that, we also think of conformance levels. So we have single A, double A, triple A. The more A's you have, the more stricter the standard. So obviously minimum for A, the general standards double A, and then the most stringent rules are triple A. So sort of the general rule of thumb is double A provides that balance of being able to provide that usability and that functionality for as many users as possible, but it's also something that's attainable and approachable for web developers and designers. So with all that being said, let's kind of give context of what's going on here in Canada. So we do have on the federal side the Canadian Standard on Web Accessibility that was enacted in 2011, basically saying that all Government of Canada websites need to conform to WCAG 2.0 AA. They also have a new Accessible Canada Act, or the ACA, which was released in 2019, which gives the strong suggestion to always adopt to the latest standard of WCAG level AA. Now, of course, the specifics of that are at a provincial jurisdiction, and there are a number of provinces like Manitoba and Nova Scotia that have that legislation in place. But the one I want to point out for our particular purpose is the AODA for Ontario. And the reason why is, and basically the reason why we're having this webinar, is because of this little restriction, or the milestone that they implied for July 1st of this year, where websites from organizations with 50 or more employees need to compile or comply to WCAG 2.0 AA standard. So that's kind of why we're here, right? I mean, in December, we were approached at Esri, making sure that our apps and our hubs that we have out there were AODA compliant. That's something that we never really thought of, at least I didn't. So being able to go through that process of being able to update our apps and take a look at sort of the accessibility of our hubs really opened our eyes to how important this topic is. And I'm sure a lot of you are confronting the same conditions. Okay, so what are we doing on the Esri side to be able to create software for all abilities? Well, through on the web app side, we do have these new instant apps, which is our next generation of our configurable apps. And all of those have been designed with accessibility in mind. So they support things like keyboard-only navigation and access to screen readers. So now when you create a configurable app and you get those options to create a medium app or a minimalist app, try to aim for those types of apps and maybe begin look at those older apps that you may have built in the past and maybe transition them over. A web app builder has all the themes are supported with a couple of limitations. Same thing goes for the widgets. Those are all also either supported or supported with some limitations. And we're working on Experience Builder to get that accessible as part of their roadmap. On the story map side, we have this next generation of ArcGIS story maps that are out there. And again, this is something that has been built with accessibility in mind on both the builder side and also for the user interface side for the viewer. And again, you have things like alternative text. So you're basically prompted to enter that alternative text for all different types of media as you're building your stories. And again, this is a good excuse to be able to think about those classic story maps that you built in the past, such as Story Map Tour, Story Map Journal, those things, and begin to transition them over to the new ArcGIS story maps so that they are more accessible for everyone. And then finally, something that's to the heart of Clara, ArcGIS Hub and Enterprise sites, again, built with accessibility in mind, I should say. And of course, they have the ability to use keyboard navigation, alternative text, etc. And there's a number of different customizable accessibility features as well as part of the hub and sites. All right, so that gives you the 40,000-foot view. I'm now going to pass things over to Clara, who's going to dig deeper and talk more about how to specifically make your apps more accessible to everyone. So Clara.
Thanks, Mark. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of the techniques that you can use to improve the accessibility of your content published through Esri applications. As your software provider, it is our job to handle keyboard interactions, status messages, error handling, state changes, and overall keyboard navigation for sighted keyboard users and assistive technologies. While you might hear me bring up screen readers in multiple examples today, we've found within Hub that if you really nail keyboard and screen reader interactions, then other technologies like using switch devices or voice recognition software will just work more naturally too. So that's, even though I might use a lot of screen reader examples, know that it does cascade. But as with many of our tools, you are often able to customize the output information product. So designing an accessible experience is really a partnership between us. While Esri is working with an accessibility vendor on the best path forward to making highly visual content like web maps accessible to non-sighted audience, I won't be covering that in today's presentation because we just don't have all the answers yet. For today's presentation, I have a hub initiative that I've mocked up around the topic of stormwater catch basins. Within the site, I have text content, image content, an embedded story map that is definitely not finished, so don't look too closely, an accessible base map, and an accessible theme. I also have global nav enabled on Hub to provide a persistent search, a search catalog featuring a few cities' catch basin data that I've borrowed, so if you see yours, thank you. And at the end of this presentation, I will show you what it's like to navigate by screen reader to a data set and open up an attribute chart within Hub. When you are authoring content or customizing an Esri app, the key elements that you will often control in our accessibility partnership are content, images, color, multimedia, and simple do-it-yourself testing. First, we'll start with the content best practices. When writing link text, the more context you can provide in the link itself, the better. Why? Well, assistive technologies, such as screen readers, often have built-in keyboard shortcuts that allow the individual using that technology to navigate in special ways. One of those ways is that they can choose to browse your page solely by links. If you say, have a set of cards that all have a Learn More button, as Hub's gallery card does, unfortunately, this will often result in the individual hearing Learn More 4 times in a row with no context on what they will actually be learning about. This is why it's best to write link text that educates the individual on where the link might take them. Now with Hub's gallery card, you do not have the option because the cards are dynamically populated and you cannot edit the individual cards. However, you have the choice to use cards without a button, which is found under the appearance settings, and thereby you'll be relying on the card heading for the link context. Or if you do use the button, we programmatically associate it with the heading for more context when people are in these shortcut menus. When creating links, you also want to avoid opening links in new tabs or windows, unless you provided some awareness that is going to happen. When you're navigating with assistive technologies, it can be a little disorienting to have a link open in a new tab. This is why WCAG technique G200 recommends not opening in a new tab at all. However, if you are going to open in a link in a new tab, because sometimes we do need to, all you need to do is warn the individual that will happen. You can do this by including a warning in the link text itself, or many sites simply include an icon that gives the warning in the icon's text alternative. Now on to headings. Each page you publish should have at least one H1 structured heading to give visitors context. And again, screen readers have a shortcut that allows an individual to navigate by headings in order to move around your page content more quickly. You can see in this screenshot I've shared of the voiceover headings menu on my hub site, or you can see it in this screenshot. This is also why you do not want to use semantic headings to increase font size. It can sometimes be tempting. I know changing font size is kind of difficult in Hub, but this is why you don't want to use the headings menu in order to increase font size, as it will muddy up this heading shortcut menu to those who rely on it. It's considered a best practice to correctly nest headings. Essentially, you start with an H1, then H2, H3. However, this is not always going to be possible within Esri's builders. We have talked with our accessibility vendor, and they said it was preferable that as an authoring tool, we present out of order headings in cards and widgets rather than not use headings at all. So you will see kind of a mixed bag sometimes. For instance, on my demo side, or my demo site, the embedded story map has an H1 because as a standalone app, that would be the page title. But within the Hub site, from a content reading order perspective, it would probably make more sense as an H2. Unfortunately, we can't change that because the story map is not going to know whether it's in an iframe or not in an iframe, and the surrounding context is not always going to be the same content structure. So we're just going to have to live with it on this site and have them slightly out of order. Moving on to labels. The vast majority of labeling will be covered behind the scenes by our apps and will include form labels, widget expand, collapse states. So you would hear things like the panel has expanded, the panel has collapsed, form validation, error handling, dialog has opened, which make the app's keyboard navigable. However, there are a few cases where you will need to be on the lookout yourself for where you need to add labeling. If you embed content like I did with the story map, then you need to write an iframe title that describes what content can be found within the iframe. When using a screen reader, iframe content isn't read as part of the natural page flow the same way it presents visually to those of us with sight. With a screen reader, the individual using that technology has to enter into the iframe. So much like with link text, you want to explain why the content within the iframe matters and why they might want to enter into it to explore. Also related to labeling, if you are including a static table on your page, which you can do this from the Hub text card, you want to make sure it includes a table header row, as this provides context for those using screen readers as they navigate through table cells. Good content structure also includes good navigation. Web pages should have a metadata title that shows in the browser tab that is unique. They should have a consistently placed navigation if present. There should be multiple methods to find the content associated with a site. This is why if you're using Hub, I strongly encourage you to keep global navigation enabled, as that will offer persistent search on all pages. I'm only going to touch upon multimedia briefly. A lot of it, like captioning video, has to be done on other platforms, but there is a feature request that comes up frequently, and I want to explain why it presently does not exist on Hub. And spoiler, it's due to accessibility. Carousels are a very popular feature request, but they are very difficult to make accessible for those using assistive technologies because the content often auto rotates, so it's moving, which makes it hard to maintain keyboard focus on a slide in order to read the description. And sometimes, usually the controls are at the bottom, which means that you have to navigate through all of the slides before there's even a method to turn it off. For those reasons, the accessibility community actively discourages using carousels, and this is why you won't see any auto-rotating or auto-playing content widgets within Hub. Moving on to images. So this is probably the guideline most of us have encountered at least once. Images fall into the category of non-text content, and as such, require a text equivalent. For images using an HTML tag, this is rendered as the alt attribute and describes the image to screen readers. If you have an image tag, you always want an alt attribute that either describes the image or marks the image as decorative, because if the alt attribute isn't included, the screen reader will read the file name. And in practicality, we aren't all the best at writing out thoughtful file names. One thing I do want to note, because I've been asked about it before, is that not all images that look like images will be communicated as images to assistive technologies. And I know that's a little vague, and I'll get into it a little bit more in a couple slides. This is just to say alternative text or alt text can be added to any non-visual content, but it is a concept. It's not an actual method of appending a description, whereas the alt attribute that I have mentioned is an actual method that can be used on image tags. But before we get into the different flavors of images, let's talk briefly about what makes good alternative text. You should describe the image succinctly, use details relevant to the context, avoid unnecessary words like image of or picture of, as assistive technologies will handle that automatically. And if you're using an image as a link, describe the link destination, not the content of the image. On this slide, I have an image that I pulled from a City of Ottawa services tweet. In the image code example, I've applied alt text via the alt attribute that says city employee shoveling snow away from a catch basin. Now, as far as relevant details go, the alternative text for this image may vary based on context. Given I pulled this off an official city communication channel, it's already implied that a city employee is a City of Ottawa employee by surrounding context. So I personally did not include those extra words. If this were not a city communication and instead were posted to a neighborhood forum about street safety, it might read something different, such as volunteer wearing yellow reflective vest while shoveling snow. So coming back to the images that look like images but aren't actually images. Background images. Background images are often found below content. So you'll have a background image, but like text will be sitting on top of it. And background images are rendered with CSS. So if an individual has CSS disabled, which they might do if they want to like eliminate unnecessary visual distraction and make it easier for them to read the page, the image is not going to show at all. Also, screen readers don't communicate anything about CSS rendered images. This is why background images are typically considered decorative and not the best means to share critical information. Side note about decorative images. They aren't exclusively reserved for background images. If an image is present for visual interest only, or if writing alt text for it provides no real additional value to the surrounding text, then you should leave the alt attribute empty to mark it decorative. On screen, I have this fancy little squirrel. This is 100% a decorative image. It offers no unique value. Now, because I'm using it as an example of a useless decorative image in this deck, I do have alt text on it in PowerPoint that says a fancy squirrel that offers no value because it's an example. But if I were including it in my hub site for Flair, I would leave the alt text field empty to mark it decorative. Now I'm going to get a little more technical about background images. You don't necessarily need to know this unless you are doing coding or doing manual testing with assistive technologies. CSS background images are nice because they are a breeze to resize when it comes to different size devices. And they can be made to communicate themselves as images. If you're going to do this though, you need to add an extra ARIA role of role equals img to the container with the background image to let assistive technologies know it's masquerading as an image. And you need to add an ARIA label that will act as your alt text method. If you were to inspect the code of Story Maps Cascade, you can see they do this for their background images. If you have noted in their builder that you have alt text for sort of a background image, so an image that sits below text, they will add alt text for that image. So by default, their section background images are going to be marked as decorative, but if you add the alt text, then they add the code necessary to make it read as an actual image. Now, for vector images, these usually fall into two categories on the modern web: SVGs or CSS icon fonts. Vector images are popular because they resize well without getting blurry. And when adding alt text to icons or SVGs, using ARIA label is a pretty effective method of attaching a text alternative. But again, if your icon offers no additional value were you to label it, consider marking it decorative or not labeling it. On screen, I'm showing an image of 3 cards in Hub's I Want to Use section. Each card contains an icon, a label, helper text, and the first card also has a down chevron. The icons on the left are hidden from screen readers because the card text tells you all you really need to know. Create a map, create a story, open an ArcGIS Online. Knowing that there is a map icon, a browser icon, or a cloud icon offers no additional value, so we hide them. But the down-facing chevron is not hidden because it is a functional icon, and it has an ARIA label indicating that the menu expands. Now, how do you apply an ARIA label? I'm going to get a little technical again because Hub does support you adding SVG objects via HTML in our text card, and I want you to know the best practices if you add them yourself. SVG objects do not support the alt attribute. So the W3C specification says to use title tags. In our experience working on Hub, not all screen readers work great with title tags, so they're a little unpredictable. We have generally found that ARIA label is much more effective, like across the board for different types of screen readers. So in the example code I have on screen for my activity pulse SVG icon, I'm highlighting where to place an ARIA label or the title tags in the code. I don't recommend using both because some screen readers will read both, and then it's annoying. You hear the same thing twice. But I wanted to give an example of the 2 places you could put your alternative text. Unfortunately, screen readers are a bit like browsers. They don't all operate exactly the same. In fact, they even fluctuate based on what browser you're using. And to that point, I've discovered screen readers are more consistent in recognizing SVGs if you also add role equals img to the SVG object. So I would encourage putting that on your SVGs as well. And then coming back to how you mark SVG objects as decorative, you want to append aria-hidden equals true to hide them from screen readers. If you are a developer, do not use aria-hidden equals false as the opposite setting. I know, it feels super counterintuitive, but it has unstable screen reader support, and you're better off just yanking off the whole attribute altogether than having the false on there. Leaving the world of images, let's take a look at color. The basic gist of the contrast guideline is that there is a luminance contrast ratio that your regular size text, large size text, and non-text graphics should pass. This isn't something you need to memorize. There are plenty of tools that will allow you to compare foreground and background of 2 colors, and it will let you know what size text you can use them at. The longer you do accessibility, the better you get at eyeballing this, but I've been doing accessibility 10 years, and I still use these types of tools. There are many tools out there. These are just a few of the ones that I use most frequently or which may benefit you as you work on Esri app customization. WebAIM is a website where you paste in 2 hex colors. I like it because they include the contrast ratio for non-text graphics as well. There's also the WCAG Luminosity Contrast Ratio Analyzer Chrome plugin, which was actually written by a member of Esri Canada. And I find it a quick way to check contrast by pulling two colors from a web page using eyedropper. If you need help creating an entire color palette, Color Safe is a nice tool to get you started. Color Oracle is good if you're doing cartography and you want to simulate the various types of color blindness, and it works on desktop software. Once you have a set of colors you want to use, you can apply these to the theme builders in our individual apps, or you can set an organization theme in ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online has both themes for the home app and also a shared organization theme, and both will warn you if you pick non-compliant colors. Plus, if you set an organization theme or accessible organization theme in Online, it will actually cascade down to some of the other web apps like Hub. So let me pop over to the browser and show you where you can set theme in Online, Story Maps, and Hub. Okay, so here I have my ArcGIS Online organization open. I'm in Organization, Settings, and I'm in the General tab. If I want to set an accessible organization theme, I can scroll down to General, and then under the Shared Theme section, click the Manage Shared Theme Colors button, and this will open up a dialog containing my shared theme. So this is my organization shared theme. If I were to come down to links, which is currently a totally legible blue on white background, and I were to select Edit and change it to something like a lovely light pink on a white background, you can see right away that it would fail the color contrast requirements. So I'm going to cancel out of that and not do that. Again, also under Settings, under the Homepage tab, there's the Homepage Editor, and they recently did a lot of work redesigning this to make it a much more accessible authoring experience. So you can select the Launch Editor button. This will open up the Edit Homepage dialog, and then under the Design subheading is an option to set colors. ArcGIS Online offers an array of accessible themes out of the box, so you can pick any one of those. But if you choose to set up a custom theme, you can then choose the Add Custom Style button. This will launch a dialog. And within this dialog, they offer the same contrast checking experience for a palette of colors. So this allows you to see how it's going to render, what the contrast ratio is, and whether you're passing legibility. Within Story Maps, so this is the story map that I've started. If you're in the Story Maps editor, you can go to the Design panel, which will open up this. And then under Theme, Story Maps offers a range of accessible themes as well. And if you so choose, you can go into Browse Themes, which will launch a theme builder within Story Maps, and you can customize the theme there. Likewise, within Hub, if you are in a site, your initiative site, you can click on Theme, and this is our theme builder. If your organization has a shared theme present and set, and you create a new site within Hub, we will use your organization theme first. If your organization doesn't have a shared theme set, we will default to CalSite, which is what you see here. And that CalSite is also out of the box accessible theme. If you do change or customize the themes in either Story Maps or Hub, you might want to use the external tools that I showed earlier to validate that you are passing contrast, because unfortunately neither Hub nor Story Maps has the same color contrast warning system that Online does yet. And back to our PowerPoint. Esri has also been working on a couple accessible base maps that adhere to WCAG color contrast standards. We currently have a light version, a dark version, and a grayscale version. While I've included links on this slide, you can also find these base maps on the ArcGIS blog if you search ArcGIS blog accessible base map, and I will show you today how to add one of these to your organization. You will need to know what group in ArcGIS Online contains your organization's base maps. You might have to ask an administrator. I had to ask my boss. And now I'm going to demo that. So switching back. Oops. Slightly slow at clicking buttons. So here we have the base map gallery group. This is my organization's group where we can have all of our base maps. So you're going to need to know the name. So I'm going to save that for later in my mind. Then over here, I've already opened up the ArcGIS blog. Today, I'm going to be adding the dark base map to my organization. So I'll scroll down. All the blogs contain multiple links that will allow you to save the base map into your organization. So today I'm going to be using the single layer one. If I click this link, it will open up the base map in Map Viewer. From here, you want to click Save and then select Save As. Give it a title, tags, summary, as you wish. I already have this saved, so we'll just pop over. Once it's saved, you need to go to your items in ArcGIS Online and open it up in the Item Details view. Then under the Share heading, you select Edit, and in the Shared dialog, you want to set the sharing level to public, and then set the group sharing level to that, so Edit Group Sharing button, and go find that group that has all your base maps. So we'll select the base map gallery group, click OK, save it. And this will allow me to access this base map both inside Story Maps under their map settings and also within Hub. So if I go, hopefully it will refresh fast enough for this to work. If I go to the Hub site and click on Settings, then under the About panel header, there is a Set Base Maps action. So I'm going to launch the dialog. Within this dialog, there's a select menu, and yes. So I currently have the light base map set, but I'm going to switch it to dark. And then you will see it in action in a little bit when I demo my Hub site. So let me just save this and publish my changes so that when we look at this on VoiceOver, we see the dark base map. Right. And back to PowerPoint for one more thing. Finally, let's touch a little bit on automated testing because I want to share some resources for either doing automated testing yourself or doing manual testing. Many app development teams at Esri use ArcGIS, which is an open source accessibility testing suite produced by the accessibility auditing firm DQ. ArcGIS is also available as a browser plugin for Chrome, Firefox, and Edge, which will allow you to run the same tests. Of course, automated testing isn't everything, and the accessibility community will stress that you should also be doing manual testing on behalf of sighted keyboard users and those using assistive technologies, such as screen readers, Zoom text, or voice recognition. And so just a bunch of links here. I am going to show you how ArcGIS will run on Hub in just a second. So, all right, so tying it all together. Now I'm going to switch back to my site to review what we've covered today, to just demonstrate the automated testing in ArcGIS and to show what it's like to navigate with VoiceOver. The ArcGIS Chrome or the ArcGIS plugin works from the browser DevTools. So let's see here. I'm going to have it already open. But the way that you would open it yourself, once you have it installed on a browser of your choice, is to either right-click anywhere on screen and select Inspect from the dropdown, or if you're using keyboard commands, it's Option Command J on Mac or Shift Control J on Windows. Once the panel is open, sorry, moving a little widget. Once the panel is open, your Chrome DevTools panel is open, there is a header at the top of the panel, and you'll typically find ArcGIS DevTools under the double chevron. Because I've already selected it, it's showing up as the top of the header. And from here, I'm going to be running the full page scan, which is free. If you have the paid version of the Axe Dev tools, then you can do the scan part of the page. But for now, we'll just run the full page scan. This is going to result in with 4 main issues and 1 sort of manual check it yourself. So the way that you can see Axe issues is you can use the highlight functionality, which will show you what part of the page they believe the issue to be at. So I will tell you the RA hidden element. This one is related to the fact that our side panel, both of these are related to the side panel. The side panel is not keyboard navigable. So while this is suggesting that there might be an issue here, you cannot actually navigate into this side panel using keyboard or assistive technologies. So it's not proper code per se, or it's not clearing their code sniffing, but there is no negative impact on actual end users. I did want to show the color contrast errors though. For color contrast errors, I wanted to show you how automated testing tools are not infallible. This is currently failing color contrast. And you can see for like the first one, and then the second one is my subheading. And this is a little weird, right? Because it's white text on a dark blue background. Now, I've been doing this long enough that I know it's passing, but I could double check using that Chrome plugin that I mentioned before that would allow me to pick out a foreground and a background color. So here, whoops, let's go for something a little lighter so that we know we're being honest. So you want to go for the lightest part of your background image. And you can see that I'm still passing for small text and for large text. So I shouldn't have any issues. Now, the reason this didn't pass, and this is just something to be aware of when you're using automated testing tools, is that the row background color is probably set to transparent, which means that my site background color, white, is what the automated testing tool is seeing. It's seeing white text on a white background because automated testing tools can't actually test your text color against background images. And white text on a white background is an automatic fail. Now, if you want to make the violation go away, or you might be concerned that somebody could toggle off CSS on your site and then they would have no more background image and you would have white text on a white background, all you need to do is to go into the row settings in Hub and set the background color to something solid like black. You'll still have the background image on top. That will still be what those of us who are cited see first. But if CSS is off, then you have a fallback. So plus your automated scan will pass because it will be able to check those 2 colors. Now you could use this in the opposite way and have a compliant background color and a non-compliant background image, but you shouldn't. Don't manipulate the tool just because you can. If the image is what is visible, then you need to test the text color against the image manually, even if the automated tool can't do that for you. So lastly, let's do a quick drive-by of this site in VoiceOver. I'm not going to attempt to talk over VoiceOver, so I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do while VoiceOver is navigating. What you will observe me doing in VoiceOver is navigating the page so that you can hear, I'll minimize this so that you will hear me navigating the page so that you can hear the headings, so that you can hear the iframe title, the image alt text, and links. I'll navigate through subheadings. I have some decorative SVGs in front of my 2 subheadings. You should not hear them at all. I will open up a data set where you'll be able to see the accessible base map, and I will then navigate to the full details view and toggle on an attribute chart and navigate to its text alternative, which is a table. I will be doing this in Safari because VoiceOver and Safari work best together. So it might take a second for me to get the volume right here, so I apologize in advance if this is a little loud initially.
VoiceOver on Safari. Creating inclusive content. Window. Creating inclusive content. Web content has keyboard focus. In creating inclusive content. Web content. Link. Skip banner. You are current. Banner. Global. Navigation. List 1 item. Global nav menu. Collapse. Button. Headings menu. Heading level 1. Site heading level 1. Adopt a catch basin. Heading level 2. Catch basins. You are currently in the voiceover menu. Heading level 2. Catch basin. With our Adopt a Catch Basin program, you can help us keep our system of more than 100,000 basins free from debris, leaves, ice, snow, trash, etc., which keeps stormwater flowing. Photo courtesy of link. Peter Burka. Ottawa fish-shaped catch basin. Image. You are currently on an image. Learn about the path of stormwater through city drains into local waterways. Frame. Heading level 2. What's involved? When you adopt a catch basin, you're volunteering to clear debris or blockages from around your catch basin at least once a month. The most critical time to clear your basin is before rainfall has a chance to wash debris down the basin. All you have to do is list 3 items. Space. P. Pull it. Remove litter and properly sort it into your own trash or recycling. 2 of pull it. Shovel snow away from the grate during the winter. 3 of 3. End of list. You are currently on a list. Headings menu. Heading level 1. Heading level 1. Heading level 2. Heading level 1. Heading level 2. Heading level 2. Heading level 3. Heading level 4. Catch ba- Heading level 4. Catch basins. Waterloo. Press link. Catch basins. Waterloo. You are crew. You are currently on a heading level 1. Claris. Image. Clara Schmidt. Esri R&D Center. Heading level 2. Summer includes all types of stormwater catch basins with it. Visit it. Link. View full details. You are currently on a link. To click this link, press. Visit it. Link. View full details. Link. Skip navigation. Press link. Skip navigation. Heading level 1. Claris. Image. Claris. Esri R&D. Visit it. Link. View map. Download. Button. More. Menu pop-up collapse. Share. Heading level 2 includes all link. Heading level 2. Table 3 columns. 7th name. Type. Column 2 of 3. Action. Column 3 of 3. Row 2 of 7. Type. Number. Button. Row 3 of 17. Name. Type. Text. Button. You are currently on a button inside of a cell. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space, Count of Access Type, and 1. Show Table. Button. Press. Show Table. Close. Button. Table 2 columns. Access Type. Click. Count. Clickable. Column 2 of 2. Row 2 of 3. Access Type. Count. 7,733. Column 2 of 2. Voiceover off.
So that was a quick demo of me navigating through Hub using VoiceOver. Unfortunately, because how I have my screen set up, you didn't get to see the VoiceOver heading shortcut menu, which I used twice there to navigate more quickly. And also, it doesn't look like my dark base map has stuck. I apologize on that, but it is there now, so I'm sure it will render at some point in the future. But you did get to see the light base map, which I had applied earlier. So let me drop screen sharing again and turn it back to Mark.
Great, thank you very much. And I wish I could talk that fast. Like I need to work on my voiceover skills clearly. We do have a few questions online here, so we're going to start firing them away at you, Claire, if you don't mind. One was about the base map. So the question is the base map required to be shared publicly, like you did in the demo?
I think if you want anonymous users to be able to see, you would need to share the base map publicly. If your hub site is just internal to your organization, then it can be shared to just your organization. But I'm pretty sure you'll have issues of it not rendering if it's not shared publicly.
All right, that sounds great. Another question, something that I actually had in mind too when I was watching your demo. Will the accessible base maps be added to the Esri default group? So be able to see that base map just like every other base map?
That is something. So if you read the blog posts, Andy Skinner, who designed the base maps, they are considering that if there is like a wide support of it. For now, it's just part of that available, those available links that he provided. And he did say that like they would not take them away unpredictably. But so definitely reach out if it's something that you want to see part of the core set of base maps. Your voice is going to be what gets it there. So.
Yeah, I really love it. I love the colors of it, the boldness of it. It's beautiful. He did a really great job on building those base maps.
And anyone can leave. He is looking for feedback. So I don't have a very strong cartography background, but he's looking for feedback. So if you go to the ArcGIS blog posts, any of them on the 3 different base maps, he'd love to hear your feedback on anything you think it could be improved there.
All right, so this next question kind of falls outside the scope of this particular webinar, but I'm just going to fire it away to you anyway, if you do have to have the answer. Does ArcGIS Pro have any accessibility options for paper maps? For example, adding alt text, flattening into an image, adding titles or authors or language. Do you know if ArcGIS Pro supports that?
Pro has it's either coming up in the imminent future, but I believe it went out recently. And I'm sure I can find the blog post for Mark and pass it along. But they did improve the export, like Pro to PDF export. For paper, I don't know about. I'm not sure I would know how it. I unfortunately don't have any background in the Esri desktop technology, but I do know they improved the export process for PDFs, but I don't know about paper.
All right, there's a really quick question about being able to get the copy of these slides to share with their colleagues. So we will be providing a PDF version of these slides to everyone. So when you get that email, you'll see a link and you'll be able to download those PDFs and you can share at will. I guess a kind of final question from me would be about sort of the mentality of accessibility. I know there's a lot of organizations that are very, I don't know, stringent's the right word, but they're adamant. It's got to be like 100% accessible, or there should be zero issues with your applications. And I'm just wondering if you have a response to sort of that that thinking about it's either 100 or it's nothing. Just
It is.
Is that the right approach?
It's hard to say. It's unfortunately, so we could be, and this is something that just happens within Hub, is like we include inclusive design. So we are trying to think about it from design all the way up to development. At this point, most of the developers in my team can use at least one screen reader. I'm trying to aim for two, one in Windows, one in Mac. But so we do try to make it part of our like full build process. But even when we get really close and we think we've done it correctly, it's like one of those errors that you saw in Axe today. That's something that Axe just released. So I didn't know about it. And I'm not infallible either. I've gotten put the wrong roles on things before. There is like so we'll encounter it like, oops, I put the wrong role on, I put an ARIA label on a text element. I didn't know that I couldn't put it on a text element, but now the tool is telling me that I can't put it on a text element. And now I did some more research and, ooh, I shouldn't have put it on a text element. So to that end, it's like we get really close to being compliant and then we find a bug and now we're not compliant. So it's very hard, I think, and we just, I think it's one of those little things that's like, you aren't compliant if you have open bugs. So I would say we're pretty close. Like we try really hard to make it an accessible experience for all sorts of different assistive technologies. We're trying to handle color contrast with your theme and all of building all the authoring tools needed so that you can build an accessible experience. But things slip through. So it's going to be hard to say. I'm sure the law is intended to be like, to try to keep everybody honest and doing all of this all the time. But it's just one of those things, like it's hard to keep on top of it. And that's why we all need to be able to do a little bit together, because that's how we're going to actually achieve a fully accessible product.
That's a really good answer. That makes a lot of sense under the context of all this, for sure. A couple more questions that just come online, so I'll fire them away at you if you don't mind. About ArcGIS Collector or Survey 123, are they accessible?
So I have worked with the the Survey 123 team on the Survey 123 web app. I couldn't tell you about the desktop connector, I guess. I couldn't tell you about that one. They are making progress. So they have drastically improved keyboard navigation in the last year. There are still, again, there's still some bugs, but they are definitely getting there and they know what they need to hit. So that's definitely something that you just want to double check. A lot of their widgets are accessible, but not all of them. So like last time I checked, or at least when I was looking at their product, which was a year ago, so they might fix it by then. But they'll like little ranking, the star ranking system didn't quite have it. So it's just one of those things you definitely want to manually check yourself to make sure that you are also using the widgets that are accessible. Which was the other product?
Oh, Collector. Well, I guess Collector's sort of a legacy app at this point.
I'll admit, I don't know anything about Collector. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. No worries. Yeah, and we do have field maps, and I know that through the field maps web app,
they're working really hard. I do work, so a member of their team is also in the accessibility working group for field maps, and so they are definitely considering accessibility for the ground up for everything. So
Okay, I'm going to fire one more question at you. How do you make interactive web maps and hub pages accessible to be translated in different languages? Hub pages can be translated, but not the interactive maps.
So we do all of those programmatic labeling that I mentioned that we were doing is all translated. So if your browser is set to a language, so one of the languages that Esri supports, all of the programmatic labels under the hood are also being translated and communicating to someone who is navigating. The one thing there's currently like an open issue around is the language of page is being handled. So as long as there is a language set at the top of the page, we are translating everything that we can translate. There is, I know within Hub, Google Translate, we have the Google Translate plugin. Unfortunately, Google has deprecated that. So we are trying to find another solution for translating content on the fly. But it's a broader Esri like initiative. And then also, and this has come up before, and so I recognize, I believe it was Ottawa, had mixed English and French content in their table, and they were asking for like language within page. So like if there were a language code on a piece of content, the screen reader will actually switch. The issue is that we would need that on the content within ArcGIS Online, and it does not exist today. So I think it is on ArcGIS Online's backlog. It's just not functionality that we can implement in Hub without that being there first.
All right, that sounds great. And thank you again. We appreciate all of the questions that came out there, and Claire for your answers. Those were all great. So I'm just beginning to wrap up the presentation today. Hopefully over the last 60 minutes, you have a good sense of some of the testing tools are out there, some different some different techniques to be able to improve accessibility in web pages, and practices on how to be able to make your applications available to everyone. Now, there are a number of resources we want to highlight. First, there is the Esri Accessibility website, which is a new website, I believe. And you'll find a link to that at the bottom of all the Esri.com sites. You'll see that accessibility link down there. And this is where you'll find accessibility conformance reports. There's a number of different articles and blogs and videos that you can access, as well as some common questions. And actually, one of the questions we got here is, do we provide a VPAT or a voluntary product accessibility template for our products to identify the limitations and the known accessibility issues? That's where you'll find it. So you can go to that Esri Accessibility website and get that info. There's also a community. Oh, sorry, Clary, go ahead.
I was just going to add, so one thing about Hub, if you go to hub.arcgis.com, in the footer, there's a link for an accessibility report. I'm just going to promote this here because we keep that more up to date because Hub releases weekly. That is where we show all our latest like defects on that, and that you'll find that will be more up to date than the VPAT, which does require like a little bit more manual accessible PDFing before we can put it up there.
Excellent, very good. Just a couple other quick plugs. There is the Esri community, formerly known as GeoNet, that is specific to accessibility. And again, they have a bunch of questions and documents, and there's a blog in there as well, so you can check that out. As well as the, I kind of found this a useful hub, the 2020 UC Accessibility Showcase. Again, it's kind of a curated hub, lots of good content about this topic you can find through that hub page. And if you do have an email, or if you want to email the team, there's the Esri Accessibility at esri.com if you have any specific questions about this topic. Now, in terms of what we do here at Esri Canada, we've got a few things to plug. Coming up next week, we have a field apps seminar. So it's like 3.5 hours of talking about how to be able to take your GIS outside. So we'll definitely, if you're into that stuff, that's a really good seminar to attend. We've got a bunch of cool webinars coming up to talk about in June. And of course, we have a number of courses that are related to online and Hub that you can check out as well. Also, a shameless plug for our podcast, Geographical Thinking. And you'll probably hear my voice in a future podcast coming up in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. So that is our presentation today. Again, thank you for tuning in. The recordings will be available online, so those will be up in a little bit. And if you do have any additional questions about the content today, just shoot me an email and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Clara, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Nope. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, Clara. Lots of great information. Thank you for your time and your efforts. And thank you for everyone behind the scenes to make